Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bruce McDonald, and this is, in fact, the Talamanca Review. I hope you're all doing well, and I'm trying to get back into the habit of regular podcasting again. I enjoy spending time with you folks. I enjoy the comments and the interaction, and I enjoy getting to know many of you personally through our conversations. Sometimes when I have little breaks, like the one that my cold brought upon me, and I try to break back into podcasting, because there's a certain momentum to it. I don't want to say like you got to stay warmed up, but you got to stay warmed up. And what I do is I just go back and I look at what I've done. And I don't know, there's something about the absence for 4, 5, or 7 days from podcasting, and then, trying to get back into it and looking at what I've done and realizing this is kind of I don't know how I would say it, kind of a very powerful body of work, and I guess what I'm saying is I like my work too. I'm a fan of the Talamanca Review. And I never quite know what's going to come out in a podcast. I never quite know where I'm going to go. Sometimes I have little bits of information. I find AI helps a lot. If I have a few questions I want to talk about, I'll do an AI report before the podcast. And you can see those ones right away because I'm reading. But for the most part, it's the ones where you just talk, where you get the most out of me, or I get the most out of myself. Because those are the ones that just sort of happen in situ in the moment. And they end up being the most powerful, because everything powerful in life happens in the moment. The planned moment is never as real as the spontaneous moment, the realized moment. And that's how I like to podcast too. I don't like to have any great idea of what I'm going to do, but sometimes after a little break, like when if I break for 2 weeks because of a fast, or if I break for a week because I'm all congested, I realize, that these are really coming out well, and I kind of freeze up a little bit. I know, it's crazy, but I do. I kind of freeze up. You hear this stories about people, men who work high steel. That they do the steel work for high rises. One of the most dangerous professions in the world. I don't think there's many casualties or anything, but we just consider it dangerous because most of us have a horrible fear of height. There's people who do the work for years, and then one day they go up the elevator, they got their lunchbox, they go to walk out onto that steel girder, they freeze. And this is even after years of doing it. And I feel that way a little bit about the Talamanca Review. I feel like I'm always trying to lay the groundwork so that I can express myself. That's the impression I got going over some of the work this time before I came back to podcasting. I'm going like, okay, great, I've I've explained imagination now. Now I can talk about this. And sometimes I realize just how difficult it is to explain these things to people. And I'm not even sure sometimes if explaining them to people has any real value. It's like telling people about UFOs. It's really not going to be real for you until you experience it yourself. And then it's real. And then you realize it's a big nothing, a big distraction. The one thing I do feel that I'm fairly consistent about, and I have a little bit of control over as a podcaster, is my take on the world, like the sort of journalistic aspect of the Talamanca Review. A journalism that encompasses consciousness. You know, we got to this point because of this decade and this decade and this decade, and lay it all out. So tonight I want to talk about what it means to be a human being and what your responsibilities are in a time like this. If you want to be part of a resistance, I suppose, although I don't think a resistance is necessarily going to win anything at this point. I think, to quote the Borg, I think resistance may be futile at this point because so much of the legwork has been done. So much of the physical infrastructure for what they want to do has been done. We're really coming late to the game. I mean, people are just starting to get me now. Not so much when I wrote Stardust Ranch or Light of Darkness. I had a friend call me up tonight. His name is Stephen McKay. And Stephen lives in Glasgow, and he's an international award-winning documentary filmmaker. He did a documentary a few years ago. Let me just get the name of it. Steve McKay, documentary filmmaker. Yeah, here it is. Film Edinburgh. Yeah, there he is. He had a really, really successful, I think this is just his resume. Yeah. And anyways, I can't find it, but the documentary was called Running Out of Time or something. But I mean, he just literally circled the world. Was feted and given awards in the Arab world, in the United States, and Europe. And I knew him before he did this documentary film. And he used to listen to me on a Scottish radio station I spoke on called People for People Radio. And I never did any podcasting or any radio till I moved up to the mountain. Never had any desire to do it. Called into a few shows. But when I moved up here, everything changed. And speaking into a microphone and engaging with people about the topics of my time and the topics that interest me I found a community that was really important to me. I have family here. My family speaks Spanish. And the sort of community I've created, podcasting and writing books, has been really enjoyable for me. I do wish more of you would read God as an Economist. That is the book I'm most proud of. It's not nonfiction like The Devil in Us or Light of Darkness or Stardust Ranch, but it is just a really fine story with great characters and brilliant dialogue. But this is what formed community for me. Anyways, Steve used to listen to me like back in like 2017. 2018, People for People Radio kicked me off. You know why? Anti-Semitism. Yeah, I thought I was talking, and this was before I had really clued into what was going on with the temple, when I had blood magic explained to me by a Palomayombe initiate. How it all works. And I really wasn't doing anything anti-Semitic. I was just telling the truth about what's coming. It's here now. Everybody sees it. And so you can circle right into why Steve called me tonight. Well, number one, he's interested in doing a documentary on jaguars. So this is an excellent place for him to do that. He's looking to get funding in place, and he would like to use my house and my access to the Talamanca Mountains and my connections with the Cape Care natives as a resource for his documentary. And I would be a production assistant and get paid. Not really something I'm thrilled about doing, but, you know, I'm sure I could help him. And the other reason the main reason he called tonight was, how did you know? And I get asked that a lot, as you might imagine. And you know what my answer is? Every time somebody asks me, how did you know, Bruce? I just look them square in the eyes and I say, how did you not know? This is not rocket science. They've been telegraphing this. They've been advertising this. They've been telling us what they're going to do for quite some time now. It was a little more hidden 10 years ago, but you can't hide much from a contemplative. Most contemplatives don't talk about stuff like this. And there's reasons for that. Maybe I'll get into them in another podcast, not tonight. I'll tell you why I do. I talk about them because they're socially relevant. I talk about them because I consider myself a journalist. I talk about things like this because the things I discover through hard work and perceptual breakthroughs and the breaking of spells in my own consciousness. And they're spells. You're thinking about something. If you're perceiving something and your perception of it is incorrect and you can't break that perception, you're under a spell. Okay? You're under a spell. When you're doing something physically bad for yourself, your body says, hey, you can't do this anymore. It starts to give you signals. You can't be drinking every day. You're in your 40s now. You're not a kid anymore. Plus, drinking alcohol 4 or 5 nights a week's not good. Why are you still drinking? Your body tells you. Your perception tells you things too. But we don't work with our perception correctly anymore. Because most people live the reality of a captured imagination. Now, you see how I did that? Had I used the expression captured imagination 4 weeks ago, before the Reality of Imagination series, you'd have no idea what I'm talking about. I suppose if you're just coming to the Talamanca Review, you'd still have no idea what I'm talking about. But the imagination gets captured. It doesn't work properly. We don't trust it. We infantilize it. Oh, that's just my imagination. That's got to be the stupidest thing anyone could say. The worst word in that sentence is just. That's just my imagination. Imagination is the doorway to spirit. And spirit is the doorway to God. There's a sequence to it. Begins physically, then it goes internal, in the image center, the imagination, where the images in your head come, where your dreams come. And then from imagination, you work out all your problems. Your imagination will tell you everything that's wrong with you if you listen to it. It's like an AI God put inside of us, but they don't want us to know that. They want us to believe that we don't have these resources inside of us. They want us to believe that we need to be told everything. We're stupid. And that's really the kind of human being they're trying to cultivate. Millions of years, some form of humanoid has been on this planet. Living, surviving, forming cultures, building languages. I live with one. Own written and spoken language. There's probably only 10,000 Kebakar in the whole world. They have their own written language. I'd be pretty damn proud of that if I were them. I know they are. And every human civilization that has ever come about has found ways to heal itself. The complexities of medicines in Central American and South American native peoples was so complicated that Ivy League PhDs had trouble keeping up with the shaman. When asked how did they come to understand plants so much in the rainforest, they said, plants speak to us. When asked how plants speak to them, they told the scientists, in our dreams. Awakened imagination. You see? You go back and you read the European mystics in the last 500, 600, 700 years or longer. If you want to go right back to like Thomas Aquinas, I think Aquinas was in the 8th century. And he was a bona fide mystic. Don't kid yourself just because he was a Catholic. Just like the prophets and many of the learned rabbis truly were learned and holy men back in the day. Don't ever think when I talk about things in a negative way like the Vatican and the Sanhedrin in 2025. I'm speaking about their eternal existence, for 2 and 3 millennia. I'm not. I'm talking about what they've become today. I should be more clear about that, but there's nobody auditing the Talamanca Review. So I don't see any great need for it. You go back and you study the great mystics, and they talk about visions. I had a vision. Well, what's a vision? What's the difference between a vision and a fantasy? Well, a fantasy is a projection you put onto the screen of your imagination. You know it's you doing it. It's something you want and you can't materialize in the world, so you fantasize about it. It's a fantasy. You don't wake up and run out and tell the world, I had a fantasy today. Why don't you do that? Because there's nothing object about a fantasy. It's a subjective creation. But when you have a vision, you run out and you tell the world, I had a vision. Because it's an object imaginative experience. Once you know what you're looking for, you can read all of these secret society texts and these hermetic texts like an expert. You can sort of crack the Sanskrit, if you will, even though they're not written in Sanskrit in the West. But you know what I mean by that expression, right? So tonight I want to talk a little bit about where we're at. Thomas Aquinas. 1274. Actually, I thought he was, wow. Died March 7th, 1274. Okay. Fair enough. So, how do you not know these things? How could you not know these things that I'm talking about? That's my question. Not how do I know them? How do you not know them? Well, you've been spelled. You've had your imagination falsely fossilized with untruth that's been accepted as truth. It's like putting sugar into a gas tank in a car. You're going to seize up the engine. The entire 20th century has been a kind of arsenic for human consciousness, especially in the West. But the only good thing I can say about it is they tried so hard to kill us as consciousness. The fact that they haven't and we survived woke us up to the fact that somebody's trying to kill us. And I'd say that's a good thing. That's another one of those examples I often use about the left hand and the right hand working together. This one's a little bit more hands-on as opposed to a demonic attack, which is a spiritual, not a physical event. The attacks were what we've been undergoing in the 20th century, and they are attacks. Make no mistake about it. They are attacks on consciousness. They may be pleasing to the mind. They may be pleasing to the body. They may be pleasing to the human ego, but they are attacks on consciousness, and they're deliberate. And now we're in the 11th hour. What is where that expression comes from, the 11th hour? Where does the expression the 11th hour come from, and what does it mean? Just loving this Gemini subscription. Ah, it's from the Bible. I did not know this. The expression the 11th hour comes from the Bible, specifically from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 20, verses 1 to 16. Here's a breakdown of its origin and meaning. The parable, often called the parable of the workers in the vineyard, or the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, tells the story of a landowner who goes out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. He agrees to pay them a denarius for the day. Throughout the day, he goes out at various times, the 3rd hour, the 6th hour, the 9th hour, and finally the 11th hour, and hires more laborers, agreeing to pay them whatever is right. At the end of the day, when it's time to pay, he instructs his foreman to pay everyone the same amount, a denarius, starting with those hired last at the 11th hour, and ending with those hired first. Now the laborers who worked all day grumble about this, but the landowner explains that he is free to do as he wishes with his money, and he is being generous. The meaning of the parable. From this parable, the 11th hour has come to mean the last possible moment or opportunity, almost too late. The very end of a period of time or a process. A critical or decisive moment that occurs just before something ends or is decided. It implies that there is very little time left to act, and any action taken at this point is done at the final stage. While the biblical parable uses it to illustrate God's grace and generosity even to those who come to faith late, in common usage it typically refers to the timing of an event or a decision. Examples of usage. The two sides reached an agreement at the 11th hour just before the strike was set to begin. She managed to submit her application at the 11th hour, minutes before the deadline. The rescue team arrived at the 11th hour to save the stranded hikers. It's a horrible parable. I mean, faith is never too late. I agree with that. Belief in God is never too late. I agree with all that. But I think the people who started working from 7 a.m. should have been paid more. They're not always perfect. As a parable of attaining God's grace pertains to an eternal consciousness, not a temporal consciousness. The body is associated with the temporal being. The spirit is associated with the eternal being. So coming to belief in the spiritual being and faith in a creator that guides and watches that spiritual being can happen at 7 in the morning or in the 11th hour, 7-11. So I get it. Beautiful. In that sense, it works. But maybe I'm just a little bit sensitive about this because I'm about to hire laborers for another house build. Yeah, let me talk about that for a moment. So we're planning Bob's house, and the beauty, once the more technical work done, which is the steel frame that's going to be the foundation of the house. There's not going to be any weight sitting on top of it per se, but the steel house is, the steel frame is just going to be 2x2 galvanized steel, but cob is very easy to work with, and it allows an opportunity for a lot of the people in my family to have a little bit of work and get muddy and cob a house. So should be a lot of fun. We're going to do a pretty big house too. We're going to do like the main wall of the house. The length of the house is going to be about 60 feet. and the width is going to be about 20. And then there's going to be about, so that's 1,200 square feet, and then there's going to be about 1,200 square feet of patio space all around. So it's a big house. You remember in Costa Rica, we build inside and outside. Outdoor space, the way you cultivate outdoor space is as important as the indoor space, because you're going to spend a lot of your time outdoors out here. It's very beautiful. Nothing I enjoy more than sitting on the sofa and watching a hard rainfall come down from my front patio. It's quite lovely. What I wanted to get to tonight is a building upon the reality of imagination, okay? So if you're not using your imagination correctly, I have to inform you, you're using your imagination and your consciousness incorrectly. Ergo, it's been hijacked and somebody else is using it. And that's how we arrive at bottlenecks like the one we're at now. And the bottleneck we're at now is something akin to what I would call a final confrontation with the negativity on this planet, which has almost finished its utility for us as spiritual lessons. And the sentient being that's going to occupy this planet in the very near future is going to be a much more elevated human being. And the people who don't make the cut will continue to incarnate on other planets. This is about the Earth. And this planet is being set aside for something quite beautiful. It's a little bit like the 5D narrative, I suppose you could say. So we may be looking at a situation where the different group consciousnesses that have been trying to influence the collective on this planet shuffle off into different realities and different realms to incarnate into. So there may very well be, at some point, an all-Jewish world. It won't be this one. And those people will be able to live as they want to live, which is what they've always wanted to do for the last forever, since their inception, since they've been a people. Okay? Nothing wrong with that. Cultivating contempt for your fellow human beings and degrading them and characterizing them as being less than you and less than human is less than human, less than kind, less than compassionate, less than considerate, less than loving, and less than inclusive. So I can see that as being a possibility. They'll have their own place to go. But the people who persist here are going to be relatively evolved human beings. And they will continue to evolve at a rapid rate on this planet. And this is all being settled now. And this has been a long time coming. And many of the things, if you want to, honestly, if you want to read a really good backstory about how we arrived at this point, I do recommend The Galactic Historian, the book. the book which I wrote. And if you want a copy of that, again, just reach out. I'll send you a PDF. It's a nice PDF. It was the typesetting was done for a hardcover. Line spacing is really nice. It's a fairly decent size font. I think it's 11 point or something. But it basically gives the causal perspective on the planet. And the causal perspective is the repository of the Akashic, and the Akashic is the record of the species. Okay? And it is a fascinating story. I mean, so much stuff has happened on this planet. So it's worth reading, especially if you're interested in what I'm saying and like how we arrived at this moment of the final battle, we'll call it, between the negative and positive polarities on this planet. So what you want to learn to do for the best outcome for yourself is first learn how to listen to your heart. Now, to have a properly functioning heart, you have to be 100% honest. And I mean razor honesty. Almost that kind of naked honesty you get in like a schizophrenic mind. Right? You can't tell any lies to yourself. Because if you lie to yourself, you're telling your imagination you don't want any objective data. You're telling your imagination you can't handle it. You're telling your consciousness you want to live in an unreality. And if there's one thing consciousness, which is God, if there's one thing that consciousness does, is it gives you exactly what you want. Just like the example I gave not 5 or 10 minutes ago about how this whole thing is going to work itself out. How a bunch of souls that are not going to be developed enough to continue evolving on this planet are going to be sent to other planets to incarnate. You have to be honest. Have you ever asked yourself how difficult it is to be honest in this time? It's nearly impossible. Everything we do is built on lies. I know. Maybe it sounds a bit dramatic. Oh, Bruce, you're being so dramatic. Am I really? Am I really? So Arthur Miller was wrong when he wrote Death of a Salesman? Willie Loman is an inaccurate character? Glenn Ross? I want you to stop and think about the degree to which lies have crept into your life. And by the way, this is why Westerners notice other people's lies so well. Because we're masters at it, and we're lying to ourselves. And the way we see our own lies is by catching other people. Oh, those Russians are lying. Those Chinese are liars. Everybody's full of shit but us. We are the most full of shit people on the planet. Okay. What do you do for a living? Or if you're retired, what did you do for a living? I'm telling you right now, if you were not a horticulturalist and made your living growing and selling flowers, you probably lied for a living. And it became so normal for you, you don't consider it lying anymore. But you know what? Your consciousness does. It just doesn't tell you anymore because you told it you don't want the honesty. And that's why you don't have object imagination. You see, not everything about the journey to consciousness is well-wishing and retreats and sandals and yoga and feeling good about yourself and wounding that inner child and healing that inner child. And then when you're done the 3-week retreat, you go back to selling life insurance or killing people as a nurse in a Seattle hospital. But you're not lying to yourself because you went to a spiritual retreat in the jungle. How could you be lying to yourself? The instructor at the retreat, who only charged you $3,200, they would have told you the truth, right? No, they wouldn't, because it tips their rice bowl over. We've become liars to this degree because of the way we set up our economy and the way it's evolved and the way it works now. And a consciousness is steeped in lies is not conducive to an awakening of imagination, or spiritually traveling is another way of saying it. So many people fall for this bullshit. Well, I'm a good person. I go to church every week. Really? What do you do for a living? I'm a car salesman. Yeah, you're a good person. You never lie. Yeah. What do you do for a living? I'm a police officer. Oh, you're one of the good ones. Yeah. Do you turn in the bad ones? Do you tell internal affairs about the bad ones? The ones out there selling drugs and killing people and pimping women? Because there's a lot of cops like that on every force, no matter how small the county. You rat them out? You're a good cop, are you? Ask yourself, and I'm not trying to be an asshole tonight. But and yes, in some measure, this may be the result of living in an earthbag house for a decade. And I may be being a bit of an asshole because I don't have to swim in the water you swim in. I don't live in the Western world anymore. I don't ride its subways. I don't get on its highways. I don't go into its offices. I don't work under its fluorescent lights. I don't have to tell your lies. Maybe I am rubbing your face in it a little bit. I don't know. I can be an asshole sometimes. Ask my wife. But I'm telling you the truth. And it hurts. It hurts like salt in an open cut. Nobody wants to hear this shit. Santo doesn't like it when I do a rant on the baby boomers. Cuts too deep. Cuts too honest. But it's true. It's absolutely true. So the first thing you have to do to get on the right path is stop lying to yourself and stop lying to other people. Not easy to do. I never really became a big liar. I couldn't afford to, because I wanted to be a literary writer, and to be a literary writer I had to tell the truth. I had to capture through fiction the truth of my time. I couldn't lie to myself. A lot of people found me to be a tremendous asshole in my 20s and 30s. Probably because I was. But not because I was trying to be an asshole, but because I was trying to live honestly in a dishonest world. You know that book at the beginning of the podcast I said I hoped you would read? God is an Economist? A number of my listeners on the Talamanca Review have actually read it. They find it harsh. They find its depiction of reality quite brutal. I had one friend read it, and he put a review up on Amazon, and he wrote, I'm paraphrasing, not quoting, but this is accurate. One can only wonder what kind of a life a person would have to live to be able to tell a story like this and to find humor in some of the situations that this book seeks humor. When I think of God as an economist, my only question to people is, how do you not see life this way? Why? Because this is the truth. You know? We've become so spiritually dead, we narcotized our spiritually wounded rather than heal them spiritually. We cannibalize each other and call it capitalism, call it social Darwinism, the strong surviving. I don't think that God put compound interest and compound usury into the natural system. I think that's a human invention. I don't think that has anything to do with the survival of the strongest. Everybody says they want a spiritual life. You know? I wake up every morning and there's messages after I do a podcast. Sometimes it can be like 24 between Facebook Messenger, Telegram, WhatsApp, email, and then the comments under YouTube, the comments under Substack. And I tell you, I wonder to myself, do you really? Do you really want a spiritual life? Because it's nothing like they tell you in religion. It's worth it. The truth is always worth it. Because the lie is non-sustainable. So if you want eternal life, you have to move toward the truth. If you can't break the addiction of yourself and the temporality of this incarnation, you don't want truth. And you're not going to survive the suffering. I'm going to call this podcast Liar, Liar. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review. I think I'm getting back into my form. I think I'm finding my rhythm on the verbal speed bag. I think I'm coming back. I don't think this cold took me out at all. Peace out.